Okay, so I met this cute guy on Tinder. All was going well while messaging, so I decided to bus over one night to hang out with him. I lived in a decent-sized college town, so public transit was a normal thing. Anyways, sounded like a good idea in theory, yes? Wrong. I have IBS and an anxiety disorder. We all know where this is going. Ladies, you know the feeling. When you're on the way to hang out with a guy, and your stomach turns to knots, and you're debating on canceling. Why do we all do this? However, unfortunately for me, this feeling overtook me while I was already on the bus. I felt the horrendous stomach ache and anxiety being to creep on. Bubble guts ensued. I told myself no problem. I'll hop off the bus super quick to stop at a connivance store. Only minor problem. I realize we are already in the suburbs, and I am 5 minutes from his house. I have to accept my fate. By the time I get off the bus, I am bending over in pain trying to suction the shit inside of me from leaving my body. I end up nearly running to his house to try to save my favorite American Eagle jeans. I get there and greet him, and politely ask to use the washroom. I turned on the faucet to try and drown out the sound of me literally dying. I was having some of the most extreme IBS shits of my life. Not only that, but my stomach was so upset that I started violently puking up my guts. So loud. There's no way that faucet was drowning out the noise of anything at that point. I had accepted the fact that there I was, stuck in a hot guy's washroom, absolutely obliterating it. I hoped I could just blame it on food poisoning and spend the night watching movies on the couch. I was planning my whole act when I went to flush. And then the unimaginable happened. I clogged the fucking toilet. I have never clogged a toilet in my life, and of course it had to happen right then and there. So I did what any rational person in that situation would do. I left. I simply put the seat down, ordered an Uber, washed my hands, and left. Told him I'll be right back. As soon as I left the house, I blocked him on everything. It has been 3 years, and I'm still ashamed and mortified. This poor boy had to deal with all of that and unclog his own toilet while just trying to get some pussy. Went out on a blind date arranged by a mutual friend. We had a lot in common, so it felt promising. The friend was really sure we'd be great friends, even if it wasn't romantic. She said the guy was an amazing single dad who had been on his own with his sons since his ex left a couple of years ago. I just finalized my divorce, and it was my first date in years. We went to a cute restaurant, and he was really polite at first. We ordered, and everything was fine. He had a glass of wine that he chugged, which should have tipped me off. When I mentioned that his younger son was around my daughter's age, everything changed. He said he was a loser due to his failed marriage, his ex not even seeing the kids because he'd picked a crazy person to marry, being a single dad, and not finishing college. This came out of nowhere. He then ranted loudly, through dinner about his dead-end job, medical his dues, needing his dad and stepmom to live with him, and now needing to be set up with a friend who felt sorry for him. I pointed out that our friend said great things about him. He then went off about how the friend wouldn't date him because he was a loser. In the few moments he let me speak, I tried to bring up all the nice things I'd heard about him. He said our friend was an idiot and that she would never go out with him. I finally asked if he'd ever asked her out, which he hadn't. Nor had he ever told her he had feelings for her. He said he was such a loser that he knew she'd say no. Clearly, he wanted to be with her. He was tearing up when he talked about how she was such a good person, but also too stupid to realize he would be good to her. He was obviously drunk or something, but he'd only had 2 glasses of wine at this point. Right after he started getting teary, the waiter came by. I tried to pass on dessert to escape, but he told her I definitely needed dessert, and he needed water and coffee. I stupidly thought that was a weird apology, and looked at the menu. He then told the server that I looked like the kind of woman who ate 2 or 3 desserts. I stared at him in embarrassment, but he said I wasn't that fat, but I clearly liked dessert. I was mortified and said it was time to go. I refused to let him pay because I had cash and wanted to leave immediately. I was shaking with embarrassment and didn't say anything. I just got in my car and left. I called my friend when I got home. She was genuinely surprised and seemed shocked by his behavior and that the guy was interested in her. While we were talking, the guy called her. He told her he'd been drinking in the parking lot before our date to stay calm. Apparently, after I left, he sat in his car, drinking more and calling around for a ride home. His dad picked him up and was yelling at the guy to hang up and get in the car. The guy saw me in a coffee shop a few months later. He smiled, stopped to say hi, remembered my name, and acted like nothing had happened. His name was Aurelian. I met him when I was 19, barely out of high school, still unsure of who I was or what I wanted. We started talking through a dating app. I was living in a small city just outside Lyon at the time, in a studio apartment with 2 thin walls and a broken heater that clanged every night like a ghost trying to get in. I was working part-time at a cafe, and in the evenings I scrolled. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe comfort, maybe danger. I was too young to tell the difference. Aurelian was 30, and he looked like someone who had lived many lives. His profile photo showed him standing next to a vintage motorcycle, wearing a wool coat and a distant, unreadable expression. His message was simple. "You seem real." That's rare. I didn't know what to make of it, but I replied. He was polite, articulate, and funny in a dry, older kind of way. He asked questions that no one my age ever did, not just what music I liked, but why I liked it. Not just where I worked, but how I felt when I stood behind the counter and smiled at strangers. When we met in person, he took me to a jazz bar tucked behind a bookstore. The kind of place you'd never find unless someone brought you there. He ordered a bottle of red wine and poured it slowly, like a ceremony, and when he looked at me, I felt my skin hum. He had that kind of presence, quiet but charged. He didn't touch me right away, not even a hand on my back. He just listened, letting me fill the space with my nervous stories, my awkward laughter. And when he finally brushed my wrist with his fingers, just lightly, it felt like lightning. I moved in with him 3 weeks later. He lived in a loft on the top floor of an old building near the canal. The apartment was dim and moody, all brick and dark wood, with tall windows that let in the gray light of the city. He paid for everything, rent, groceries, even a new phone when mine cracked. He liked to take care of things, he said. He liked things to be in order. At first, it was intoxicating. The way he'd pour my coffee before I got out of bed. The way he'd undress me slowly, deliberately, like I was something to be studied and memorized. Even the way he'd watch me while I moved around the apartment, silent, focused, it made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't known I needed. Our intimacy was intense. He liked control, but not in a cruel way, not then. He liked to guide, where my hands should go, when I should close my eyes, when I should wait. And I liked to be guided. I liked giving in to him. He made me feel like there was something sacred in letting go. But over time, the control didn't stop at the bedroom. It started with the door. "Don't lock it," he said one night, as I was turning the deadbolt. "There's no need. You're safe here." I thought it was charming at first, his confidence, his certainty. I left it unlocked. Then he started checking my phone. Not asking, just picking it up and scrolling while I was in the shower or asleep. When I said something, he smiled. "I'm not hiding anything from you. Why should you hide anything from me?" He didn't like some of my clothes. "Too tight," he said about a pair of jeans. "Too many eyes," he said about a red dress. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me a little too long, and I'd find myself changing before we went out. He didn't like my friends either. "They don't understand us," he said. "They're still playing games." I stopped replying to texts. I stopped going out. It was easier to stay in, wrapped in his arms, listening to the rain hit the windows. He started coming home at strange hours. Sometimes early, sometimes late, always without warning. Once, I found him sitting on the couch in the dark, waiting. "Just wanted to see you," he said. But something in his tone made my stomach twist. When I asked for a little space, he frowned. "You want space from me?" He said it like I'd insulted him, like I'd broken something sacred. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. But the silence that followed was worse than either. One night, he grabbed my wrist during an argument. Not violently, but hard enough to leave a mark. I pulled away, and he let go immediately. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. The next day he brought flowers. Lilies. My favorite. He cooked dinner, played our favorite record, and kissed my hand like he was asking for forgiveness. I told myself it was a momentary lapse. We were both stressed. I stayed. But then came the wall. We were arguing again, about nothing really. I had spent too much at the market. I had forgotten to text when I left the cafe. He was pacing, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. And then he slammed his palm against the wall, just inches from my face. I didn't flinch. I think I was too scared to move. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he sat down and started crying. I stood there, frozen, watching the man who had once poured my wine with such care now holding his head in his hands, sobbing. That night, we didn't touch. I stayed on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, pretending to sleep. I started hiding money, slipping coins and small bills into the lining of my purse, into books he never read. I called my older sister, who lived in Marseille, and told her everything. She didn't hesitate. "Come," she said. "We'll figure it out." The night before I planned to leave, he brought home wine. He was sweet again, gentle, charming, the version of him I had fallen for. We drank. He poured too much. I felt lightheaded. Off. He started kissing me, slow at first, then harder. His hands were everywhere, gripping, pulling, and when I tried to slow things down, he didn't stop. He wasn't violent, not exactly, but he wasn't listening either. Afterward, I went to the bathroom and locked the door. That was the first time I realized I didn't feel safe. I looked down and saw the bruise on my wrist. A new one. I waited until he fell asleep. Then I locked myself in the bedroom and called my sister. She didn't ask questions. She just said she was on her way. The next morning, the police came with her. Aurelien was sitting on the couch, barefoot, drinking coffee. When they told him why they were there, he laughed. "She's being dramatic," he said. "She always does this." But they took me seriously. They walked me out. He didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the wall. A week later, he showed up at my sister's building with a friend and a gun in the glove compartment. He never made it past the gate. The police arrested him on the spot. I didn't go to the trial. I didn't want to see his face again. I was 21 when I met Michael. It was early 2020, just a few months before the world would change in ways none of us could have imagined. I was in my third year of college at a small technical university in Maryland, studying information systems. My classes weren't easy, and I was one of only a handful of Caribbean students on campus. My family was back in Trinidad, and I hadn't been home in over a year. I missed the food, the laughter, the warmth. So I stayed busy, classes, labs, part-time shifts at the campus library. I didn't date much. I wasn't looking for anything serious. But sometimes, late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd scroll through dating apps. Not even to meet anyone, just to feel like someone saw me. And that's how I met Michael. He was older, 25. He said he used to study at the same university, but dropped out to work. He sold weed mostly. "It's just retail," he joked. "But greener." I laughed. I wasn't shocked. Half the guys on campus were either customers or part-time dealers. He had a calm energy, the kind that didn't ask much of you. We started chatting late at night. He'd send me memes and links to obscure indie movies. I liked that he didn't try too hard to impress me. He didn't flood me with compliments or make me feel like I had to perform. Our conversations were dry, sarcastic, easy. The kind of thing that made you feel safe. Then the pandemic hit. Classes went online. The library closed. My roommate flew back to the Bahamas overnight. I couldn't afford to go home, and even if I did, I wasn't sure I'd be able to come back. Flights were canceled, borders closed. I was stuck in my dorm, alone, with no job and no plan. That's when Michael asked if I wanted to stay at his place for a while. "I've got a couch," he said, "and better Wi-Fi." I hesitated. We'd only hung out twice in person, once at a food truck, once in the campus rec room before it shut down. But the thought of sitting in my dorm, eating cereal, and watching the same YouTube videos every day made me feel claustrophobic. I packed a small bag and moved in. His apartment was small, a one-bedroom with a busted screen door and a fridge that hummed too loudly. But it was clean, and his couch was comfortable. He let me use his laptop for Zoom classes. We ordered takeout, played video games, watched old VHS movies he'd collected from thrift stores. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even really a relationship. It just felt like survival. Weeks passed, and the world outside got quieter. For a while, it was almost peaceful. But that peace didn't last. It started with little things. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram, and he asked, "Who's that guy liking all your posts?" I told him it was someone from my database class. He just nodded, but his jaw clenched. Then he started asking to see my phone. "Just curious," he said. "Not like I don't trust you." I laughed it off the first time. But then it became a habit. He'd check it while I was in the shower or asleep. He started deleting messages, DMs, group chats, even emails from classmates. I'd ask him and he'd say, it was nothing important. Just distractions. I told myself he was just being protective. We were in quarantine after all. Maybe the isolation was getting to him. Maybe it was getting to me. Then he started commenting on what I wore around the apartment. "You don't need to wear that tank top," he'd say. "It's just me here." Or, "Why are you putting on makeup for a Zoom class?" I stopped trying to explain. It was easier to change into a hoodie or keep the camera off. I began to feel like I was shrinking into myself. My texts went unanswered because he had deleted half my contacts. My professors started emailing me about missed assignments. I tried to catch up, but Michael always wanted me to play games with him or just chill. If I said no, he'd sulk. Or worse, he'd stare at me with this blank expression like I'd betrayed him. I remember the night everything shifted. We were watching a rerun of The Office, and I sent a laughing emoji to a friend who had posted a meme. Michael looked over, took my phone, and scrolled through the message. It was harmless, a joke about Tiger King, but he tossed the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. "You think I'm stupid?" he said, standing. "You think I don't see what's going on?" I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about? You're flirting with people. You're laughing behind my back." "I'm not. It was just a meme," I whispered. He stepped closer. "You think I don't know what women like you do?" And then he shoved the coffee table. His hand hit mine. Not hard, but hard enough that my phone, which I had picked up, slipped and the glass cracked. A piece of it sliced my palm. Blood dripped onto my leg. He froze. "Shit. I didn't mean to." I didn't wait for him to explain. I grabbed my bag, still half-packed from weeks earlier, and left. I didn't even put on shoes. I walked to the nearest gas station with my bleeding hand wrapped in a towel and called a friend from the payphone. 6 stitches. That's what the nurse said. You're lucky it didn't go deeper. I stayed with a classmate for the next few days, then moved into emergency housing arranged by the school. I didn't tell many people what happened. I didn't even report him. I just wanted to forget. I graduated a year later, quietly, virtually. I moved to Philadelphia, got a job doing IT support. I started going to therapy. I didn't date for a long time. I barely posted on social media. I was cautious, guarded, always checking behind me. Then, a year and a half after I left, I got a call from my aunt. She was crying. She told me someone had been hit by a drunk driver. A family friend. A man I had known since childhood. He didn't survive. The driver was Michael. He had spiraled after I left. Lost his apartment. Got arrested twice for possession. Started drinking heavily. Then one night, he ran a red light and plowed into 3 people. 1 died. 2 were hospitalized. 1 was my aunt's neighbor's son. His trial was short. He didn't say much. Didn't apologize. Didn't cry. I watched the news clip once. Just once. He stared at the camera with that same blank expression I remembered. Like he wasn't even there. It was the fall of 1985, and I was 24 years old, buried in graduate school, and convinced I was going to change the world. I was studying sociology at a mid-sized university in the Pacific Northwest, the kind of place where it rained more days than not, and every room smelled faintly of wet books and coffee. I wasn't popular, but I was respected, at least in academic circles. I kept to my research, wrote long-winded papers on social deviance, and tutored undergrads for extra cash. I didn't have time for dating. Or maybe I just didn't make time. Most of my energy went into proving myself. Then I met Carolyn. She came into my life through a university-run matchmaking program. It was an experimental project, part of a psychology department study on compatibility. You filled out a long survey about your values, goals, ideal partner traits, and then a week later, you got a letter in your campus mailbox with a name and a contact number. I almost didn't fill it out, but I'd been lonely, and a friend dared me to try it. So I did. Carolyn's first message was on my answering machine. "Hi, this is Carolyn. I think we matched. I'm in the criminology program. Let me know if you want to grab coffee sometime." Her voice was clear, confident, with a hint of amusement, like she already knew I'd say yes. We met at a cafe near campus, one of those old places with chipped mugs and a dozen types of tea no one ordered. She wore a long black coat and had dark, straight hair that fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were sharp, and her smile was deliberate. Everything about her felt precise, intentional. We talked for 3 hours. She was brilliant. The kind of person who could quote Foucault and then pivot to a dirty joke without blinking. She challenged everything I said, but not cruelly. She just wanted to see if I could keep up. I liked that. I needed that. We started seeing each other almost daily. She'd show up at my apartment late at night, sometimes with a bottle of wine, sometimes just with that look in her eyes that meant I wouldn't be getting any sleep. She was intense in every way, not just intellectually but physically too. Being with her was like standing too close to a fire. It felt dangerous but warm, and I was drawn in. We never defined what we were. She didn't like labels. "They're a trap," she said. People get lazy once they name something. I didn't care. I was hooked. I craved her attention, her approval, the way she'd whisper things in my ear that made me forget my own name. But slowly, things started to feel off. She'd disappear for days without explanation, then show up at my door like nothing happened. Once, she told me she'd been at a funeral. Her cousin had died in a car crash. I tried to comfort her, but she just shrugged and asked if I had any beer. A week later, I mentioned her cousin to one of her classmates. He looked confused. "Carolyn's an only child," he said, "and all her relatives live in Boston." I confronted her about it. She just smiled. "People lie all the time," she said. "Why does it bother you when I do it?" She had a drawer in her apartment filled with fake IDs. I found them one night while looking for a lighter. Dozens of them, different names, different birthdays, even different hair colors. I held one up and asked, "What is this?" She took it from my hand and tossed it back into the drawer. "Research," she said. "Don't be so dramatic." But I couldn't stop wondering. Who is she really? Was anything she told me true? Then there was the plagiarism incident. A student in our department, Marcus, was accused of stealing a major term paper. He was devastated, swore up and down it was his original work. Carolyn shrugged when I brought it up. "He's not that smart," she said. "He probably copied something and forgot." A week later, I found the same paper, word for word, in Carolyn's desk drawer. I knew then. She had framed him. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I told myself she was broken, not evil. That she just needed someone to see through the walls she built. But it kept getting worse. She started talking about how she could manipulate anyone. "People want to be controlled," she said one night, lying in bed beside me. "They just don't admit it. Give them a story, and they'll believe anything." She told me once she had faked a suicide note to get out of a final exam. That she'd convinced a professor to give her an A by forging an entire research project. I laughed, thinking she was exaggerating. But then I saw the project. Pages of fake citations, invented interviews, even a forged signature from a supposed advisor. When I finally told her I couldn't do this anymore, she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at me and said, "Shame. You were finally becoming interesting." She vanished from campus soon after. No one knew where she went. Her apartment was emptied out. Her records were still on file, but it was like she had melted into the air. I moved on, or tried to. I graduated, got a teaching position, started dating someone stable. Carolyn became a dark chapter, one never revisited. Until 15 years later. I was watching the evening news when I saw her face. She'd been arrested in Oregon, charged with elder abuse, identity theft, and 2 counts of murder. She had befriended elderly neighbors, poisoned them slowly, drained their bank accounts, and forged documents to inherit their property. Police suspected she'd done it before, possibly 3 or 4 other times in different states, always under a different name. They showed a courtroom sketch. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. I got a call from a federal investigator. They had traced one of her identities back to our university. My name was on a list. They wanted to know what I knew. I testified. I told them about the fake IDs, the stories, the forged research. I told them about how she made people believe things that weren't real, how she could wrap you around her finger with a smile and a whispered lie. In court, she didn't look at me once. She was convicted. Life without parole. Sometimes I still dream about her. Not the crimes, not the lies. Just her voice in the dark, the way she'd trace her fingers down my back and ask me what I was afraid of. I tell myself I was young, naive, but the truth is, part of me wanted to believe her. Wanted to be chosen by someone so sharp, so fierce, so dangerous. Now I teach criminal sociology. I give lectures on manipulation, coercion, and the psychology of deviance. I show my students how charm is a tool, how language can be a weapon. I met Soren on campus during my sophomore year. It was one of those early fall days when the trees hadn't quite decided whether to let go or hold on, and the air carried just enough chill to remind you that summer was over. I had just gotten out of my intro to behavioral neuroscience class and was sitting on the steps outside the library, scrolling half-heartedly through a dating app one only opened when I felt invisible. His message popped up like a spark. "You have that look, like you're always trying to figure out if this is real or a simulation." I smiled. It was the kind of line that could have come off as pretentious, but something about it felt playful, curious. Soren was 27, finishing a 2nd degree in comparative literature. He'd gone through something, he said, never quite explained what, but had taken a break from school and come back older, more grounded. I was 20, still clumsy with my emotions and always second-guessing myself. He made me feel seen. Not just noticed, but understood. He remembered little things, the way I hated the sound of ticking clocks, how I always ate the crust of my sandwich first, how I shook my leg when I was nervous. He'd text me quotes from books I hadn't read and ask what I thought they meant, like I was someone whose opinion mattered. Our first few dates were simple: coffee, long walks through the sculpture garden, late-night talks in his car. He never pushed for anything physical too quickly. He was gentle, attentive. When I told him I'd only been in one serious relationship before, he smiled and said, "Then we'll take our time." That winter, he asked me to move in with him. I remember being surprised, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt so fast. He said, "Look, the dorms are loud, and I have the space. You're always here anyway." And he wasn't wrong. I had started spending most nights at his apartment, a second-floor unit in an old house just off campus. It smelled like cedar and espresso beans, and he always had music playing, jazz, ambient, sometimes weird instrumental folk I never understood but grew to like. At first, it felt like a dream. I didn't have to worry about noisy roommates or campus showers. He made breakfast in the mornings, soft-boiled eggs and toast cut into triangles. He'd leave me notes in the margins of my textbooks when I fell asleep studying. When I got sick, he brought me soup and stroked my hair until I fell asleep. But slowly things shifted. He started commenting on my friends. "Do you really think Lyra has your best interest at heart?" he asked once after she posted a group photo without tagging me. "She seems jealous. You should keep your distance." I brushed it off, but the comments kept coming. "Why does everyone you hang out with act so performative?" Soon, I felt embarrassed around my friends when Soren was around. They were loud, messy, still figuring things out, and he made me feel like I had outgrown them. I started turning down invites, saying I was tired or had to study. He told me my energy was too sacred to waste. Then it was my family. My mom called while we were watching a movie one night. I let it go to voicemail, and Soren raised an eyebrow. "She calls you every day. That's not normal. You need space to become your own person." I didn't argue. I started texting her instead of calling. Then less frequently. Then not at all, unless she reached out first. I told myself I was just setting boundaries. He got more critical, but never overtly cruel. He didn't yell or throw things. He just questioned. Questioned my choices, my clothes, my tone of voice. "You sound passive-aggressive when you say that. You sure you want to wear that sweater? It makes your shoulders look narrow, like you're shrinking. Don't phrase it like that. People won't take you seriously." I started writing things down before I said them. Proofreading texts. Changing outfits 3 times before we went out. I told myself I was evolving. Maturing. He said I was becoming more refined. And then one night, we had a fight. I can't even remember what it was about. Something stupid, like dishes or laundry. But he raised his voice, which he never did. And when I stood up to leave the room, he blocked the doorway. "Don't walk away from me," he said. His voice was low but sharp. "I just need a minute," I whispered. He looked at me for a long time. Then he stepped aside. Later that night, I woke up to him sitting on the floor, crying. He said he was broken, that I was the only one who made him feel safe, that he didn't know how to handle conflict because everyone he'd ever loved had left. And then he said, "If you leave me, I won't survive. I'll kill myself." I froze. He said it so calmly, like it was a fact, a law of nature. I told him I wasn't leaving. I held him until he stopped shaking, but something inside me shifted. A line had been drawn. I started planning my exit quietly. I reached out to Lyra again, told her I needed help. She didn't ask why, just said her couch was mine. I started hiding cash, changed my passwords, downloaded a silent emergency app on my phone, just in case. The night everything exploded, it was raining. The windows were fogged up, and the apartment smelled like burnt toast. We were arguing again. He had found my suitcase half-packed under the bed. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. I tried to stay calm. "I need space, Soren. Just some time to think." His face went pale. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to abandon me." And then he pulled it out. A gun. I didn't know he owned one. He kept it in a drawer, apparently, said it was his father's, passed down. He didn't point it at me. He just held it in his lap, resting across his thighs as he sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm not threatening you," he said. "I just want you to see what you're doing to me." I kept my voice steady. "Can I get you water?" He nodded. I went into the kitchen, slipped my phone out of my pocket, and opened the emergency app. It sent a silent ping to dispatch with my location and a preset message. Domestic threat. Armed. I brought him a glass of water and sat across from him, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear his voice. He was talking about timelines, how we were meant to meet, how everything led to this. How he couldn't let me go because I was his anchor. The police arrived 7 minutes later. They knocked softly, then harder, then announced themselves. He didn't resist. Just stood up, placed the gun on the floor, and let them take him. He was held for psychological evaluation. I gave my statement, shaking but clear. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I just wanted to disappear. I withdrew from my classes, moved 2 states away, into Lyra's cousin's guest room, changed my number, deleted all my social media. I started over, but the messages found me anyway. He used fake accounts, new emails, new usernames, different photos. Sometimes they were desperate. I miss you. I'm better now. Sometimes they were angry. You made me this. Once, he sent a photo of our old apartment door. Just the door. I got a restraining order. Filed it in my new city. I started therapy. Got a job at a bookstore. Then slowly returned to school under a different name. It's been 3 years. I'm in a better place now, stable, grounded, surrounded by people who see me without trying to fix me. But I still jump when I hear footsteps behind me at night. I still double-check door locks. Still look over my shoulder in coffee shops. I still flinch when someone says, "It's fate that we met." I matched with Leith on a Thursday night while waiting for my laundry to finish drying at an overpriced laundromat that smelled like dryer sheets and disappointment. He was one of those clean-shaven, artfully casual men who looked like he spent a lot of time trying to look like he didn't spend any time at all. His profile was short, looking for someone to share playlists and pastries. I should have known. That kind of curated nonchalance always masks something. But I was tired of analyzing every red flag before even saying hello. So I messaged him first. He replied almost immediately. Witty, charming, with just enough vulnerability tossed in to feel sincere. When I told him I worked in archival research, he said, "So you preserve forgotten things. That's beautiful." It was the first time anyone had said anything about my job that wasn't a variation of like libraries. We met in person 3 days later. He picked a tiny cafe near his apartment, an unassuming place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. He wore a slightly wrinkled button-down and boots that looked like they'd walked through concerts and heartbreaks. When I arrived, he stood up, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You're even more interesting in motion." I laughed. I was flattered, and I ignored the fact that he kept one eye on his phone the entire time. Our early dates were always on his side of town. At first, I assumed it was convenience. He had a dog, and I didn't. He said he worked long hours in the gaming industry, which apparently meant he was always on call for server issues, code failures, and the occasional existential crisis from a developer in another time zone. He never came to my neighborhood. I lived 40 minutes away, which in city time felt like a different continent. I offered, I joked, I even teased him about being a homebody. He always had a reason: traffic, deadlines, a leak in the ceiling he was waiting to get fixed. I stopped asking after a while. You don't want to seem needy too soon. Not when someone makes you feel like you're the only one worth talking to. He was attentive in weird, curated doses. He'd text me lyrics from songs I didn't know, links to obscure articles about memory and time, voice notes where he'd half-whisper things like, "I had a dream about you, but I don't want to ruin it by describing it." I fell for it. Not all at once, but slowly, like someone sinking into warm water, not realizing they're beginning to drown. Still, there were cracks. He was always on his phone. Not in the way we all are, but more like he was waiting for something. Like he was trying to manage a dozen conversations at once, and still make me feel like I was the only one. Sometimes, he'd turn it over when I walked in. Once, I caught a glimpse of a notification from someone named Rona Dizzy. He said she was a cousin. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to be the jealous type. And then over time, he just started fading out. He'd take hours to reply. Our calls got shorter. He stopped asking questions, started giving one-word answers. When I called him out, gently I thought, he said, "I'm just going through some things. You're making this about you." I apologized. That's the part that still gets me. I apologized. The last time I saw him, he kissed my forehead and said, "You're such a rare kind of person. Don't lose that." Then he disappeared. No warning. No fight. Just silence. I gave it a week. Then 2. I sent one last message, something like, Hope you're okay. Let me know if you want to talk. He left it on read. I wish the story ended there. About a month later, I got a message on Instagram from a woman I didn't recognize. Her name was Hema. Her profile was private, but her message was direct. Hi, this is random, but I think we need to talk. I've been seeing someone named Leith. Found your profile through mutual tags. I think he was seeing us both. My stomach dropped. I clicked on her profile again. One of her tagged photos showed the same cafe. Same angle. Same man. We set up a call. I half expected it to be a prank. It wasn't. We talked for 2 hours. Our timelines overlapped almost perfectly. The nights he'd cancel on me last minute, he was with her. The times he was off the grid for a supposed work trip, she was getting selfies from his couch. He told her he didn't do social media. He told me the same. He told her I was an ex who couldn't let go. He told me she was a friend who had a crush. We swapped screenshots like investigators building a case. At one point, we even laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. This man had been running parallel lives like it was a sport, and we'd been the spectators, thinking we were the main characters. We confronted him. Together. Sent him a joint message, laid it all out. He didn't reply, but the fake accounts started showing up within days. New followers with no posts. Likes on old photos. A message from someone named Kian1990 that just said, "You're cold for this." Then one from LivelySoul_88. He really loved you. You didn't have to ruin everything. He messaged one of my friends, asking if I was okay. Then another, asking if she thought I'd ever forgive him. Hema got the same treatment. Her co-workers were contacted. One of them was sent a playlist titled For Her, full of songs Leith had once sent to both of us. We blocked everything, reported what we could, warned others. I posted a thread about it, nothing that named him, just a general PSA about emotional manipulation and digital stalking. It went a little viral. I got messages from strangers who dated someone like Leith. A few even said, "This sounds like the guy I dated in 2021. Part of me still wonders how many of us there were. Eventually the noise stopped. Or maybe it just moved on to someone else. I kept the screenshots. Not because I need proof anymore, but because sometimes when I start to doubt myself, when I wonder if I overreacted, if I was too sensitive, I look at them and remember, no, I was lied to. Deliberately. Repeatedly. With precision. I should have known Kale was trouble the first time I saw his spice rack. I'm serious. It was pristine. Labeled. Alphabetized. Paprika sitting next to pink Himalayan salt, like they were co-captains of a Pinterest board. When I asked if he actually used any of them, he smiled and said, "Only when I'm trying to impress someone." Reader, I was impressed. I was also apparently the someone. We met on a dating app during that weird lull in the middle of winter, when everyone's pretending they're emotionally available, just to avoid being alone until spring. His profile was warm. Photos of him at food truck festivals, reading David Sedaris, and one of him in a beanie holding a rescue cat named Machi. I messaged him first. I said, "You look like a man who knows what to do with a cast iron skillet." He replied, "Only if you're okay with breakfast for dinner." We were in each other's lives less than a week later. Kale was good. At first. Too good, maybe. He cooked real meals. Not just pasta and sauce, but things with reductions and garnishes. He made playlists for our drives. He folded my laundry without being asked. He said things like, "You don't have to explain yourself to me, babe, I get it." It felt like I had stumbled into a rom-com, except there were no quirky best friends warning me that the perfect guy is never really that perfect. We moved in together 6 months later. I know fast. But he made it easy. He had a 2-bedroom in a quiet part of town with exposed brick and a clawfoot tub. He said I made the place feel like a home. I brought in my plants and my chipped mugs and my oversized sweaters. He bought us a welcome mat that said, "This must be the place." For those first few months, it was domestic bliss. We cooked together. We watched terrible cooking shows and judged strangers for oversalting their duck. We had sex in the mornings, in the afternoons, with the windows open and the curtains half drawn. It was comfortable, playful, safe, until it wasn't. The first shift came quietly. A strange comment here. A weird look there. He'd ask who I was texting, then make a joke about how I was always secretive. One time, I came back from a work meeting and he said, "You were gone longer than you said. Everything okay?" I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just anxious. Maybe he'd been cheated on before. Not everyone enters a relationship fully healed. But the questions kept coming. He wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what we talked about. If I left my phone face down, he'd flip it over. I started catching him scrolling through my notifications when he thought I was asleep. He never yelled. He never raised his voice. He just stared, disappointed, like I'd broken a rule I didn't know existed. And then there was the app. It showed up on my phone one night. A little icon I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a glitch. But when I opened it, it asked for a password. And when I asked Cale what it was, he said, without hesitation, "That's just a tracker. To keep us both honest." I blinked. "Come again." He smiled like it was a joke. "It's nothing serious. Just, accountability." I deleted it. He reinstalled it. Twice. We fought. It was the first real fight we'd had since moving in. He accused me of hiding things, said I was emotionally unavailable and had walls. I told him he was being insane. He said, "You're not allowed to use that word." He slept on the couch that night. I didn't sleep at all. I should have left. But I told myself we'd just moved too fast. That maybe we needed therapy. That maybe I was overreacting. Then came the life insurance policy. Yeah, I found it during a cleaning frenzy. I was reorganizing our file drawer because I had run out of other things to control. It was buried beneath receipts and expired coupons. A manila envelope with my name on it. Inside, paperwork. Official. Stamped. Signed. I hadn't signed it. It named me as the insured. Cale as the beneficiary. I stared at it for a full minute before my brain caught up with what my eyes were reading. When I confronted him, he didn't flinch. "It's just a precaution," he said. "We live together. If something happened to you, I'd be the one stuck with rent." I asked how he got my signature. He shrugged. "You leave your paperwork lying around." It wasn't hard. I didn't know what to say. My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. He made dinner that night. Like nothing happened. He made risotto with lemon zest and brought it to me in a bowl with a sprig of parsley on top. I didn't eat it. I started planning my exit. Quietly. I set up a new account at a different bank. Opened a P.O. box. Told a few close friends what was happening. One of them offered her guest room. Another offered a baseball bat and 0 questions asked. But Cale wasn't done. He started staging things. Picking fights over nonsense. Claiming I'd moved his keys. Accusing me of deleting his emails. Once he said I'd given him attitude in front of his friend when I literally hadn't spoken for 20 minutes. He was trying to get a reaction. He wanted me to hit him, or scream, or break something. Anything that could be used against me later. I didn't give him that satisfaction. Then came the night with the hammer. I was in the kitchen. It was late. I was microwaving leftovers and wearing one of his old t-shirts because all of mine were packed. He came in drunk. Eyes glassy. Movements slow. He said, "You never loved me." I didn't reply. He picked up the hammer from the counter. He'd been hanging shelves earlier that day and walked toward me. I backed up. Slowly. He raised it. Not fast. Not like in movies. Just enough that I knew what was happening. I screamed. The neighbor heard. The police came. He was arrested that night. The investigation took months. During that time, more came out. He had drained our joint account. Nearly $10,000 gone. He'd used it on home supplies, which included a few too many heavy-duty tools and some very suspicious cleaning agents. There was also a woman. A third party. He'd been meeting with her under the guise of therapy. She later admitted to authorities that he had asked her about non-lethal toxins. She assumed it was research for a book. He wasn't writing a book. He was charged with attempted assault, forgery, stalking, and attempted poisoning. The prosecutor took it seriously. The judge did too. Cale was sentenced to 25 years. I moved out of state. New city. New job. New locks. I still have a scar on my right hand from that night. Not from the hammer, he never touched me with it. It's from where I gripped the edge of the counter so tightly that my skin split. I don't date much. Not yet. Not because I'm scared exactly, but because I don't want to trust anyone who folds laundry too well ever again. And I don't keep a spice rack anymore. I didn't think much of it when I first met Tun. It was just a short-lived connection, the kind that starts with an emoji-laced message on a dating app and fizzles before the third drink. He was friendly, a little awkward, but in a charming way. He called himself a systems tinkerer and said he worked in IT consulting, which I assumed meant he fixed printers and helped people reset their passwords. We went out twice. Once for tacos, once for a walk around the lake in early spring. No red flags, really. Just no spark. He messaged a few times after that, but I didn't reply. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just didn't feel anything. And in my experience, gently ghosting was often safer than spelling things out. Especially when you're a woman living alone. I forgot about him quickly. Or at least, I thought I had. 3 weeks later, odd things started happening. My phone would freeze when I opened certain apps. My laptop fan ran constantly, even when I wasn't using anything heavy. I chalked it up to aging tech. My MacBook was overdue for a replacement anyway. But then came the sounds. First, clicking. Late at night, when the apartment was silent, I'd hear it, soft, uneven clicking, like a mouse button being pressed over and over. It wasn't coming from my devices. It was coming from the ceiling. Or the walls. I couldn't tell. I told myself it was pipes. Old wiring. The kind of thing you notice only when your mind is quiet. But then my landline, yes, I still had one, mostly for work, started crackling whenever I answered. Static, hissing, sometimes faint voices in the background. I joked with my sister that my apartment must be haunted. She didn't laugh. "You should get that checked," she said. "Seriously, someone could be tapping your line." I rolled my eyes, but I did call a repair technician. Just in case. He came on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. I stayed in the apartment while he worked, answering emails at the kitchen table. It wasn't until I heard him say, miss, that I looked up. He was holding my modem in one hand. In the other, a small device I didn't recognize, cylindrical with a blinking blue light. "This isn't part of your router," he said. "Did you install this?" I shook my head. He found 2 more near the phone jack, and one taped beneath my desk. They were GPS and signal sniffers, devices used to track location and intercept data. Not something your average person picks up at Best Buy. I felt the blood drain from my face. He ran a full diagnostic. My laptop had malware installed, keylogging software that had been recording every keystroke and sending it to an unknown IP address. My phone had been jailbroken remotely. My landline was wired to a passive audio recorder. I remember staring at him, feeling like I was floating above the room. "Is this legal?" I asked dumbly. He gave me a look I'll never forget. "Absolutely not. This is surveillance." I filed a police report the next day. They asked if I had any idea who might do something like this. And that's when I thought of Tun. I hadn't heard from him since I stopped replying. But I remembered now, he had asked about my router during our second date. Casual, like he was making conversation. Something about bandwidth throttling, I think. At the time, I didn't even understand the question. It wasn't enough for an arrest. But the officer flagged it, took down his name, told me to be cautious. I changed all my passwords, threw out my laptop and got a new one, bought a new phone, switched internet providers. I thought that would be the end of it, but things got worse. I started waking up feeling watched. Not just uneasy watched. I'd walk into the kitchen and feel a presence, like someone had just left the room. My cat started refusing to go into the laundry area, where the door to the garage was. She'd stand there, tail puffed, growling low in her throat. Then one night, I came home late from a work event and noticed the garage door was slightly ajar. I never left it open. I turned on all the lights, grabbed the heaviest object I could find, a marble paperweight, and walked through the house, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Nothing looked out of place, but I felt something was wrong. So I checked the garage, and that's when I found it. A sleeping bag, protein bar wrappers, an old coat, and a tablet, plugged into a portable charger, blinking softly. He'd been living there. I don't remember screaming. I don't even remember running. I just know that suddenly I was on my neighbor's porch, banging on her door, my voice hoarse and my hands shaking. The police arrived quickly. They searched everything. In the garage, behind a stack of boxes, they found a small monitor connected to a network of hidden cameras. One above my front door, 2 inside the house. One in the vent above my bedroom. They arrested him 2 days later, in a motel 15 miles away. He had fled after I found the garage. But digital forensics confirmed it. His fingerprints were on the tablet. The malware traced back to his IP. He had been watching me for weeks. Maybe longer. They charged him with stalking, unlawful surveillance, and unauthorized access to computer systems. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back, my hands clenched in my lap. He didn't look at me once. Just sat there in a gray hoodie, like all of this was some misunderstanding. He got time. Not enough, but some. I moved. I changed everything: devices, phone number, bank accounts, even my car. I started using a VPN. I stopped using smart speakers. I put tape over my webcam. I don't click on links unless I know exactly where they came from. I still check for cameras. I don't let anyone into my home now unless I've known them for years. I keep the garage locked with a deadbolt and an alarm sensor. I sleep with a motion detector light outside my bedroom window. I've become someone I never imagined I'd be. Hypervigilant, suspicious, wired for fear. People ask why I didn't notice sooner. Why I didn't suspect anything. But that's the thing about people like Tun. They don't come in kicking doors. They come in with questions, with curiosity, with compliments that sound like observations. They make you feel interesting, seen, and then they disappear into the walls. I met Elisheva at a networking event for digital creatives, which is basically code for people who say, "We should collab sometime," and never mean it. I was standing near the fruit skewers, trying to look like I wasn't rethinking all my career choices, when she walked up and said, "You look like the kind of person who hates this." I blinked. "I do." "Same," she said, plucking a grape off my plate like we'd known each other for years. "I'm Elisheva." She was one of those people who talked with her whole face, eyebrows, lips, cheekbones, all in on whatever emotion she was expressing. It was captivating. She had this energy that made you want to lean in closer, even when you weren't sure why. We exchanged information, and later that night, she messaged me on an app one hadn't even realized I still had installed. "You're the guy who looked like he was being held hostage by a cheese cube, right?" I laughed. I messaged back. Things moved quickly from there. Our first date was at an arcade bar. She beat me at every single game, then accused me of letting her win, which I absolutely did not. Our second date was a rooftop picnic where she brought a bottle of wine and a Bluetooth speaker that only played French jazz covers of 90s pop songs. It was completely ridiculous and somehow perfect. For the first few months, everything felt like a story I'd want to tell later. We had inside jokes by week 2. She called me professor because I wore glasses and used the word nuance too much. I called her chaos in turn because she left half-drunk coffee cups in every room she entered. We were gross and giddy and obnoxiously infatuated. It was great, until it wasn't. It started small, like most things that unravel your sanity. One night, I mentioned that she'd misremembered the name of a movie we'd seen together. It wasn't The Matrix, Recharged, it was Reloaded. Minor correction. Her whole face changed. "No," she said, dead serious. "It was Recharged." I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. "I promise it's Reloaded." She stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out a DVD case. "Then explain this." It was one of those bootleg cases you get at gas stations in the middle of nowhere. The title on the spine, The Matrix Recharged. She held it like Exhibit A. "You bought that ironically," I said. "Or maybe you're just used to being right and can't handle when you're not." The air in the room shifted. I didn't know what to say, so I let it go. But it happened again. And again. Little things. Song lyrics. Conversations we never had. Apologies she claimed I owed her for things I was pretty sure hadn't happened. At first, I blamed my memory. I mean, who hasn't misremembered something? But then it escalated. We were out to dinner with friends, and I made a joke, harmless, I thought, about how she always left her phone on 3% battery. She smiled, but her eyes hardened. Later, at home, she exploded. "You humiliated me." "What?" "It was a joke. You made me look stupid in front of your friends. You always do that." I apologized, even though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. She cried. I held her. Then we had sex on the kitchen floor, because apparently that's how we processed conflict now. The next morning, she kissed me on the forehead and said, "You're so lucky I forgive easily." That should have been my cue to run. Instead, I stayed. Because when it was good, it was addictive. She'd write me poems, leave notes in my jacket pockets. She once made me a playlist titled, "In Case of Existential Crisis." She made the world feel like a place where strange, beautiful things could happen. But when it was bad, it felt like I was falling through a trap door in my own mind. She started rewriting entire conversations. "You said I could borrow your laptop," she insisted one day, when I found her installing some weird plugin that nearly fried my hard drive. "I never said that," I told her. "Yes, you did. You said, 'Make yourself at home.' That implies consent." I stared at her, speechless. "You're weaponizing hospitality." She rolled her eyes. "You're gaslighting me." I laughed. "I shouldn't have." "You think this is funny?" she snapped. You always do this, make me the crazy one. That word, crazy, started to hang between us like a chandelier made of knives. At a dinner party, she accused me of undermining her in front of my friends because I corrected her pronunciation of quinoa. She said quinoa. I gently said quinoa. She threw a wine glass. Not at me, but hard enough that it shattered against the bathroom door. I told her I needed space. That maybe we were moving too fast. That I was starting to feel like I couldn't breathe. She left. 3 nights later, she showed up at my apartment at 2:13 in the morning. I opened the door, half asleep, thinking something was wrong. She stood there in her coat, hair wet from the rain, holding a tiny notebook. I just wanted to say, she whispered, you were right about the Matrix. Then she turned and walked away. That would have been an okay ending. Strange, cinematic, but final. But then came the emails. At first, they were neutral. Hope you're okay. I found your old hoodie. Remember when we slow danced to the elevator music at Target? Then they turned bitter. Hope your new girl can handle your superiority complex. You're not as emotionally intelligent as you think. Then came the fake accounts. A new follower with no posts, liking my photos within seconds. A comment on an old tweet. Nuance boy strikes again. I changed my locks. I blocked her on everything. I deleted the dating app where we met. I stopped going to our favorite bookstore for a while. I started leaving my blinds closed even during the day. Eventually, the messages stopped, or I stopped noticing them. It's been over a year. Sometimes I'll find a note in an old book and wonder if she planted it there. Sometimes I hear a jazz version of a 90s song and my stomach knots. Once, I dreamed she was standing in my kitchen again, holding a DVD labeled The Matrix, Misremembered. I laughed when I woke up. Then I checked the locks. The thing about gaslighting is that it doesn't just make you doubt your memory. It makes you doubt your reality. It makes you question whether the floor is really beneath you, or if you're just pretending not to fall through it. I'm okay now. I date carefully. I fact-check my own thoughts when I need to. I tell my friends the whole story, even the parts that make me sound like a fool. They laugh with me, not at me. That helps. And if I ever see a DVD labeled The Matrix, recharged again, I'm not opening the case. His name was Eshe. I met him backstage at a theater in downtown Denver during a tech rehearsal for a small experimental musical. I was working as a lighting assistant, one of those jobs you take in between gigs to pay rent and stay connected to the scene. He was the percussionist, brought in last minute after the original drummer quit. He wore vintage boots, had chipped black nail polish, and smelled faintly of cloves and something metallic like old cymbals. He tuned his drum kit without looking up, and when I passed by with a coil of cables over my shoulder, he said, "You walk like you've got rhythm. Do you dance?" I laughed, caught off guard. "Only when no one's watching." He grinned, still not looking at me. "That's the best kind." We didn't exchange numbers that night. But a few days later, I got a message on a dating app one barely used anymore. His profile was sparse, just a black and white photo of his hands on a snare drum and a bio that said, "Let's make something loud." His first message was, "Lighting girl, right? Or should I say shadow architect?" I smiled despite myself. We started talking every night after rehearsal. He was funny in a fractured kind of way. His thoughts zigzagged, full of references to obscure music and strange books I hadn't read. He sent me voice notes of half-finished songs, and I sent him photos of lighting grids and sketches I made during downtime. It felt like we were building something, even before we touched. A few nights later, we ended up at his apartment after a post-show drink. He lived in a converted warehouse filled with pillows, plants, and shelves of tangled wires and cracked instruments. The mattress was on the floor, and the walls were covered in concert posters and torn-up poetry. It looked like a place where time got lost. We slept together that night, and it was the kind of connection that doesn't ask for permission. He kissed like he was trying to remember something, touched me like I was an instrument. I hadn't been with anyone like him before, anyone who made me feel like creation and destruction were the same thing. I stayed. One night became 2, then 3. I started bringing over clothes. My toothbrush ended up by his sink. He called me light girl, and pulled me into him like I was gravity. But slowly, I started noticing the edges. He was always tired, always chasing something. There were tiny baggies in the pockets of his jackets. He said it was just to stay awake, just to stay sharp. "Everyone uses something," he said. "Yours is caffeine. Mine's just louder." At first, I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to. I'd seen artists with messy lives before. It came with the territory. He wasn't hurting anyone, I told myself. He was just wired differently. But then money started to disappear. He'd ask to borrow $20 for groceries, then come back with nothing but a bottle of cheap wine and red eyes. My debit card was declined one morning at the pharmacy, and I found out my account had been drained. Automatic payments for streaming services I didn't subscribe to, deliveries from places I'd never heard of. When I asked him, he got quiet. "I'll fix it," he said. "You know I will." I wanted to leave then. I should have. But love doesn't always make sense. Especially not the kind that feels like rescue. I thought I could help him. I thought he'd get better if I just held on tighter. The verbal shifts came next. He'd call me dramatic when I cried. "You're too sensitive," he'd say. "You don't understand pressure. You've never had to carry anything real." Once, after I asked where he'd been all night, he said, "You're not my mother. Don't start acting like one." But the next morning, he'd make breakfast barefoot in the kitchen, humming a jazz rhythm while flipping fried eggs. He'd kiss my shoulder and say, "Sorry." I was spun out. You know I don't mean it. I told myself it wasn't abuse because he never hit me. But sometimes silence is a sharper weapon. And sometimes neglect cuts deeper than anger. One night, I came home from a late shift and found him passed out on the floor, a thin line of white dust on the coffee table, his fingers twitching in sleep. The music was still playing, something ambient and slow, like a heartbeat underwater. I knelt beside him and shook his shoulder. "Eshe," I whispered. "Hey, wake up." He blinked, confused, and tried to smile. "You're glowing," he said. "Or maybe I'm dreaming." I stayed up all night watching him breathe. The next day, I told him I was leaving. He laughed. "You always say that." "I've never said it before." "Then you're lying to yourself." I packed a small bag. I didn't have much left at that point. Just a few clothes, some notes from old shows, and a notebook full of lighting plots and poems I'd never finished. When I walked toward the door, he followed me. "Don't," he said. "I need to. I'll get clean." "You said that last month." "I mean it now." I turned to face him, and that's when he grabbed the lamp, an old stage prop with a jagged base, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, sending shards across the floor. I froze. He looked at me, panic in his eyes. I didn't mean to do that. Then he picked up something I hadn't even noticed before, a prop dagger from a production of Macbeth we'd both worked on. It had a dull aluminum blade, but it looked real enough in the dark. He pressed it to his chest. "If you leave, I'll do it," he whispered. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stepped forward and put my hand on the blade. It was cold. Fake. Theatrical. Just like the stories he told himself. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. "And if you hurt yourself, it won't be because of me." He dropped it, collapsed onto the couch, started sobbing. I walked out and didn't look back. I stayed with a friend for a few weeks, slept on an air mattress, and worked double shifts to make up for the money I'd lost. I blocked his number, deleted our photos, threw away the clothes he'd bought me, but I kept the dagger. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself of how close I came to disappearing inside someone else's chaos. Maybe to remember that not every threat comes with a raised voice. Some come with a broken promise and a slow erosion of who you are. Months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ashay had gone back to his hometown in New Mexico. Checked into a rehab center. Got clean, supposedly. Started working at a music school teaching rhythm to kids. I didn't reach out. I moved to Los Angeles. I got a job designing lighting for small productions in Silver Lake and Echo Park. I made friends who didn't ask questions unless I wanted them to. I dated someone kind. Someone whose touch was soft, not possessive. Someone who didn't try to make me smaller. But the dagger still lives in a box at the back of my closet, wrapped in an old stage cue sheet. I don't take it out, but I know it's there. A reminder that love isn't always enough. The first time I saw Juro's profile, I almost swiped left. He looked ordinary. Not unattractive, just unremarkable. A man in his late 30s, standing beside a dog that may or may not have been his, wearing a fleece jacket that had probably seen more than one hiking trail. His bio was short, new to town, quiet by nature, looking to build something real. I'd been on dating apps long enough to know that quiet by nature could mean anything from shy and sweet to emotionally unavailable to full-blown manipulative. But something about the way he phrased it made me pause. We matched that same night. His messages were thoughtful, deliberate. He used full sentences, never rushed the conversation. He asked about things most men didn't. What my apartment smelled like when I cooked, the name of the book I'd read twice in college, and why I chose it both times. He told me he liked people who paid attention to small things. I told him I liked people who didn't make me feel like I had to shrink to be liked. Juro said he understood that. We met in person after a week of talking. He picked a quiet tea shop on the edge of town. It was raining that day, and he offered me his jacket the moment I stepped inside, even though we were only walking from the door to the table. He ordered chamomile and didn't touch his phone once. When I asked what brought him here, he said simply, I needed to start over. I didn't press. Everyone has a reason for leaving somewhere. The first few weeks were easy. He texted every morning, never too much. He asked questions and remembered the answers. When I mentioned I liked honey in my tea, he showed up on our next date with a small jar from a local farmer's market. He listened with his whole body, eyes steady, hands still, like he was cataloging every word. He never pushed for anything physical. In fact, he seemed almost hesitant to touch me at first. He said he wanted to be careful, that he'd been in a long relationship that ended badly. She left and took everything, he said one night, while we sat in his car outside my apartment. Except the guilt. I'd never heard anyone phrase it that way. We didn't sleep together right away. I liked that. It felt intentional, not performative. Like he was building something slowly, brick by brick. But then the bricks started shifting. He told me his wife had died. It came out casually, during a conversation about grief. I'd mentioned my grandmother. He nodded, then said, My wife passed a few years ago. Suicide. Complicated situation. I didn't know what to say. I offered silence. He said, she wasn't well. And I wasn't enough to help. I told him that wasn't his fault. He didn't answer. Just looked out the window and said, That's what people say. After that, things changed, not in any obvious way, but in the way light changes when a storm is coming. Subtle. Heavy. He started making small comments. You're too kind. You don't see how rare you are. People don't usually treat me the way you do. It felt like flattery, but also like a warning. I started paying attention. He never talked about his past unless I asked. And when I did, the stories didn't quite connect. He said he'd grown up in Maine, but once mentioned a high school in Oregon. He said he'd worked as a mechanic, then later said he'd spent most of his 20s in IT. When I pointed out the inconsistency, he just smiled and said, I guess I've lived a few lives. Once, I asked where he lived before moving here. He said, too many places to count. But I found something in his glove box. It was just a receipt, barely legible, but it had a town name on it I recognized. A small place about 300 miles south. I'd passed through it once, years ago, and remembered it because the gas station had a mural of a bear eating pancakes. I asked him about it. He said he'd never been there. I let it go, but I started to wonder. Then came the letter. It was tucked inside a book on his nightstand, one I'd borrowed and returned. I hadn't meant to open it, but it fell out when I flipped the book open. The envelope was old, soft at the edges, unsealed. It was addressed to someone named Maura. The handwriting was shaky. Female. It said, I hope one day you tell the truth. About what happened. About who you were before you moved on. I still dream about her. About the way she used to smile when she thought no one was watching. I put it back. Didn't mention it. But that night, I looked up the town on the receipt. Then I looked up Maura and death and suicide and Juro and every variation I could think of. I didn't find much. But I found a local article, archived on an old news site. It was about a woman, late 20s, found dead in her home. Suicide. Survived by her fiancé. No foul play suspected. The fiancé's name wasn't listed. But the photo attached showed a man with his arm around her. It was Juro. Different haircut. Younger. Same eyes. I didn't sleep that night. I started pulling back. Slowly. I canceled plans. Took longer to reply to texts. Said I was busy with work. He didn't push. He just said, let me know when you're ready to come back. Then I got a message. It was from a woman named Sela. Her profile was private. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But the message was clear. Are you seeing someone named Juro? I think we need to talk. We spoke the next night. She dated him 6 months before I did. Same town. Same calm demeanor. Same story about the wife. But her version had more details and more lies. He'd told her his ex was still alive but estranged. That she'd faked a mental illness to get out of legal trouble. He said he'd raised a child with her, but that the child had chosen her side. None of that lined up with what he told me. Sela said she left when his stories started to contradict each other. But not before she'd found a small box in his closet, full of old IDs, women's jewelry, and a worn children's drawing with "To Daddy" written in crayon. She tried going to the police. They said none of it was illegal, just unsettling. Then she told me something else. The woman from the article, the one who'd died, had a sister. That sister had posted online recently about her niece saying things that made her uncomfortable. About how her mommy's old friend came to visit sometimes. About how he watched her sleep. About how he didn't knock. I felt sick. We called the police again. Sent what we had. They listened. Took notes. Then said, unless something happens, we can't act. Something. They needed something. I blocked Juro on everything. Changed the locks. Told my friends. Told my boss. Told my landlord. I still check the sister's page. She posts photos of her niece at the park, at school, holding a puppy. I stare at them for minutes at a time, looking for signs of fear. For anything that might tell me what's coming. Juro disappeared after that. Deleted his profiles. Changed his number. I don't know where he is now. But I know how he operates. And I know what he's capable of. So I keep watching. Quietly. Because sometimes, the worst thing a man can leave behind isn't a broken heart. It's a pattern. Ravi and I met on Jeevansathi. My mother had practically forced me onto the app after my cousin got engaged. Just talk to someone, she said. You're not getting any younger. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for someone who wouldn't drain me. Ravi's profile was clean. MBA, worked in logistics, lived in Pune. His photos were quiet, no sunglasses, no gym selfies. Just him standing at a temple, holding a book, smiling in that way that doesn't show teeth. He messaged first. Namaste Nehaji. I told him he didn't have to be so formal. He replied, respect is my default. He was attentive. He remembered everything I told him, my favorite author, the name of my dog when I was 7, the exact words I used to describe my classroom. He brought me a book on our first date, with a handwritten note inside. He said he wanted something calm and lasting. It felt safe. Familiar, like something I could explain to my family without having to defend it. Our parents met within a month. My mother was ecstatic. My father nodded with approval. He's serious, they said. Finally. But then things started to feel off. He asked where I was constantly. If I didn't reply for an hour, he'd call. If I said I was at school late, he wanted to know who else was there. Once, I mentioned I was going shopping with a friend, and he asked for the mall, the store, how long I'd be out. I laughed. What? Are you going to surprise me? He didn't laugh back. That evening, he showed up. Said he was just nearby. My friend looked at me like, are you okay with this? I didn't know the answer. When I tried to pull away a bit, just to breathe, he tightened the grip. Not physically, but through silence. Guilt. I just like to know, he said. That's what people do when they care. Then came the message. It was late. We were texting about wedding invites. I sent him a joke about eloping. He didn't reply for a long time. Then he sent, do you trust someone who was in jail? I stared at my phone. Are you talking about yourself? I asked. He replied, would it matter if I was? I couldn't sleep. Something had cracked. The next morning, I told my friend Ananya. She works in legal aid. I gave her his full name, his parents' names, anything I could remember. She called me 2 days later. Ravi had been arrested 5 years ago. His fiancée at the time had filed a complaint, domestic violence, threats, emotional abuse. The charges were dropped after her family intervened. But the report was still on record. There were hospital logs, a neighbor's statement, a pattern. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said, that was another life. I've changed. You were supposed to help me stay good. I froze. That's not my job. He started crying. Said I was abandoning him. Said I was ruining his last chance to have a normal life. Then he said, if you leave, I'll end it. I blocked him. He started calling from unknown numbers, messaging from burner accounts, apologizing, then blaming me, then begging again. I reported him. My family cut off all contact. My mother cried for a week, not because I ended it, but because she hadn't seen it coming either. Since then, I've started speaking up, especially to other women on matrimonial apps. I tell them to run background checks. I tell them polite isn't always safe. I tell them that abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it arrives gently, with folded hands, and a bookmark with your name on it. I met Corwin at a bar just off the main road in a tiny town I was passing through for work. I was supposed to be there for one weekend, attending a local film festival, taking notes for a freelance piece, and maybe, if I was lucky, getting inspiration for the script I kept pretending I was writing. The bar was mostly locals, all flannel and boots, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and they all turn to look when a new face walks in. I ordered a beer and took out my notebook, half hoping no one would talk to me. Corwin did. He sat down 2 stools away and said, "You don't look like you're from here." I smiled. "That obvious?" He grinned, holding a bottle of something dark. "You have city shoes. No one around here owns shoes that aren't waterproof." I looked down at my boots, black leather, not even scuffed. He wasn't wrong. Guilty. We talked for an hour. He was older, maybe late 30s, with sun-worn skin and a voice like gravel softened with honey. He told me he worked on his family's ranch just outside town, mostly livestock and occasional repairs. Said he liked the quiet. Said most people these days were too busy performing for strangers. That last part stuck with me. We exchanged numbers, and I figured that was the end of it. Then he texted the next day, asking if I wanted to see the ranch. "It's not fancy," he wrote, "but it's real." I said yes. When I pulled up the long dirt drive the next afternoon, his truck was already waiting. The house was weathered but sturdy, surrounded by fields and a few barns. Chickens wandered near the porch, and the air smelled of hay and something faintly sweet. He gave me the tour, showed me the horses, the old tractor he was rebuilding, the faded photograph of his grandfather that hung above the fireplace. He cooked dinner, grilled steak, roasted potatoes, beer from a local brewery. We sat on the porch and watched the sky shift from gold to indigo. It was the kind of evening that makes you question everything about your current life. When he kissed me, it was gentle, confident. He tasted like smoke and salt and something I couldn't name. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I stayed the night. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. He was in the kitchen barefoot, humming a tune I didn't recognize. It felt wholesome, like something you'd read about in a lifestyle blog called Returning to the Earth. That weekend turned into 2, then 3. He invited me back the next month. "You said you wanted to get out of the city," he said. "Why not stay a while?" I didn't say yes right away. But when I got back to my apartment, 4th floor walk-up, constant sirens, neighbors who never made eye contact, I kept thinking about the quiet. The way he looked at me like I was already part of something solid. I packed a bag and returned. The first red flag was almost charming, at first. He didn't like that I checked my phone often. "You're not here if your brain's always somewhere else," he said. I agreed. I started leaving it in my bag. Told myself I was detoxing from distraction. Then he made a joke about social media. "You don't need to post every thought. Who are you trying to impress?" I hadn't posted anything in days, but I deleted the app anyway, just to keep the peace. He started asking questions about my friends. "That guy who comments on your photos, he's just a friend. You think they'd come help you out here if something went wrong? City people only show up when there's a camera." It wasn't jealousy. It was more like suspicion disguised as insight. Like he saw through the people I loved and was trying to protect me from disappointment. I started pulling back. Less texting. No calls unless I was alone. He told me I should think about staying longer. "You're calmer here," he said. "You sleep better. You don't wake up anxious." He wasn't wrong. I was sleeping better. But I also wasn't dreaming anymore. A few weeks later, we had an argument. It started over something small. He'd made a comment about how I didn't help enough with chores. I made a joke. He didn't laugh. "I'm not your vacation," he said. I apologized. Tried to explain that I was still adjusting. That I appreciated everything he was doing. He stood very still. Then he grabbed my wrist, not hard, but tight enough to make me freeze. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. I pulled away. He let go immediately. No yelling. Just a long, cold stare. He cooked dinner that night like nothing happened. Kissed my forehead. Said, "You're stronger than you think." I didn't sleep. I started planning how to leave. Quietly. Slowly. I told myself I'd wait until morning, make up an excuse, drive back to the city. But the next night, after another tense conversation, the kind where nothing obvious is said but everything feels sharp, he got drunk. I'd never seen him drink more than a beer or 2. But that night, he opened a bottle of whiskey and didn't stop. He started talking about control, about how people pretend to be free, but they're just chasing approval, about how I didn't really want to go back to my fake life. I tried to change the subject. He got quiet. Then he stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a hunting knife. He didn't wave it. He didn't threaten. He just pressed it gently to my throat, barely touching skin, and whispered, "You'd be safest if you stayed. No one out there knows you like I do." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just nodded slowly. He smiled. "See? You get it." Eventually, he passed out on the couch. I waited. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone, which was still in my bag. No service anyway. I grabbed my keys, crept outside, and made it to his truck. Mine was blocked in by a tractor. I didn't know if it would start. I didn't care. It did. I drove fast and quiet, headlights off until I hit the main road. I didn't stop until I reached a diner 2 towns over. I called a friend, called the police, filed a report. They picked him up a few days later, said they couldn't charge him with much, no physical harm, no witnesses, but they'd keep him for questioning. 3 months later, another woman filed a complaint. That one stuck. I moved. Again. I changed my number, got a new car, started therapy. I still have nightmares where I wake up and he's standing in the doorway, holding that knife like it was just a kitchen utensil. But I also remember the moment I turned the key in his truck and felt the engine catch. The moment I knew I was leaving, no matter what. People always say, trust your instincts, like it's easy. But when someone wraps their control in warmth, in home-cooked meals and slow kisses, it's hard to recognize the danger until it's pressed against your skin. I trust myself now, fiercely, and I don't wear city shoes anymore. I wear boots I can run in. I met Nilo through an app one wasn't even supposed to be using anymore. I had sworn off dating apps for 6 months after a string of disappointing and, frankly, depressing experiences. But one night, after a long shift and 2 glasses of mediocre wine, I reinstalled it. Just to see. I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't even hoping anymore. I was scrolling out of habit, half watching a documentary about coral reefs, when his profile caught my attention. He was different. No mirror selfies. No gym stats. Just a photo of him reading in a sunlit room, surrounded by stacks of books. His bio said, "I like people who ask questions. Not the shallow kind. The kind that unravel things slowly." I hesitated over the message button for a few minutes before finally typing. "Okay then. What's a question you've never been able to answer?" He replied almost instantly. "Why do we fall in love with people who can hurt us? And why do we stay?" I didn't know it then, but that question would follow me. We messaged for 2 weeks before meeting. His texts were thoughtful. He shared quotes from obscure novels, asked about my childhood pets, wanted to know what I dreamed about when I was bored at work. He never asked for photos, never made any inappropriate comments. He was almost too careful, like he'd studied the manual on how to behave and was determined to ace every chapter. When we finally met, it was at a quiet tea house downtown. No loud music, no crowds. He wore a soft navy sweater and corduroy pants, and he smelled like cedarwood and dried pages. He looked exactly like his photos, maybe even better in person. His voice was calm, low, deliberate. I remember thinking he could read bedtime stories to adults and make a fortune. I liked him. Right away. He was respectful without being robotic, curious without being invasive. We talked for 4 hours. When I said I should get going, he walked me to my car and said, "I'd really like to see you again. But no pressure." We started dating. Slowly. He didn't push. He was the first man I'd been with who didn't seem to want anything from me right away. No constant texting, no pressure to come over late. He gave me space. He asked before touching me. He made me feel like I had control. And for someone like me, someone who had spent years learning how to be small to avoid being swallowed, that meant everything. We talked about books and music, about longing and loneliness. He told me he'd grown up in a strict household where emotion was disciplined out of you. He said he'd learned to be gentle because he'd seen what the opposite looked like. I believed him. But over time, I started to notice something odd. He never invited me to his apartment. Not once. At first, I didn't question it. Maybe it was messy. Maybe he was embarrassed. But after 3 months of dating, it started to feel deliberate. Every time I brought it up, he had a reason. I'm in the middle of reorganizing. My roommate's got family visiting. It's not a great neighborhood. I'd rather come to you. I let it go. Because when someone is kind, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Then there was the intimacy issue. He didn't like to be touched unexpectedly. He flinched if I reached for his hand without warning. He said he was still working through some things. I understood. I tried not to take it personally. We were physical, but it was distant. He'd disappear into himself sometimes, go silent during or after. Once, he asked if I could wear my old high school hoodie during sex. I thought it was a strange request, but I didn't read into it. I figured it was a nostalgia thing. Who doesn't have quirks? But then he started bringing things over. A pink backpack with cartoon rabbits, hair ties with little plastic charms on them, a pair of white socks with lace trim. He gave them to me like gifts, wrapped in tissue paper and tied with string. I saw these and thought of you, he said. I was confused. These are for me? I asked. He nodded. They'd look really sweet on you. I laughed a little, unsure. I haven't worn socks like this since I was 10. He didn't laugh, just looked at me waiting. I felt a prickle at the base of my neck. One night, he asked if I could wear my hair in pigtails and use a high voice. Just for fun, he said. It's harmless. That word, harmless, rang in my ears like a warning bell. I said no, flatly. He apologized. Said he got carried away. Said he didn't mean anything by it. That he respected me. I wanted to believe him. Because I had started to care about him. Because I didn't want to be wrong again. But the next time he came over, I found a pleated skirt in my closet that I hadn't bought. It was my size. It had tags from a boutique I'd never heard of. I confronted him. He looked embarrassed. I just thought maybe if you saw it, you'd be curious. You're open-minded. I thought you'd understand. Understand what? I asked. He hesitated. Then he said it. I have a preference. A fantasy. I don't act on it, never have. I just like the aesthetic of youth. Not actual children. That's not what this is. It's about innocence. Playfulness. It's a theme. I felt like the ground had shifted under me. I asked him to leave. He did. Quietly. No argument. No scene. He texted later that night. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier. I was afraid you'd think I was dangerous. I'm not. I've never hurt anyone. I just wanted to be seen. I didn't reply. The next morning, I reported him to the platform we'd met on. There was no crime, technically. Nothing that would stick legally. But I didn't care. I wanted it documented. I blocked him everywhere. Deleted my profiles. Changed my number. I started dressing differently. Cut my hair. Got rid of every soft, frilly, innocent-looking thing I owned. I didn't date for a year. I couldn't. Because every time someone called me cute, I felt like I was shrinking. Like I was being pulled back into a version of myself I didn't give permission for. I told a few friends. Some understood. Some didn't. He didn't actually do anything, one said. You're overreacting. But it wasn't about what he did. It was about what he wanted. It was about the way he disguised it as gentleness. The way he walked the line so carefully, so deliberately, that I almost didn't see it until I was standing at the edge. It was about how long it took me to trust my own discomfort again. Everyone told me dating would be different once I turned 30. More serious, more selective, more like a job interview. I didn't mind that. I liked clarity. I liked boundaries. I liked men who didn't overshare or oversmile. That's probably why I fell for Taehyun. We met on a dating app built for professionals. Swipe left for small talk, right for people who knew the difference between a latte and a flat white. His profile was precise. A dentist. Lived in Gangnam. Favorite movie, In the Mood for Love. No shirtless mirror selfies. No looking for my queen nonsense. Our first date was at a bookstore cafe. He wore a navy coat and a thin silver ring. He didn't talk too much. Just watched me carefully, like I was telling a story with my hands, even when I wasn't moving. He asked about my job, I'm a fashion buyer, and didn't try to make it sound frivolous. He said, that must be exhausting, always chasing trends that change before you can catch them. I remember thinking, he sees it. We dated for 2 months. It was quiet, steady. He never pushed. Never asked invasive questions. Never took photos with me, but I assumed he was private. Some people are. He'd text late at night, usually something like, get home safe, or don't forget to eat. He never sent hearts or gifts. Just periods. I liked that. He never let me tag him in anything. Said he didn't use social media. That it made people fake. I didn't argue. I was tired of men who curated everything. His absence from it felt refreshing. Until it didn't. It was my friend Hygiene who found it. She was on a Korean forum, reading through beauty reviews, when she saw a blog link posted under a thread titled Real Sugar Baby Confessions. She clicked out of curiosity. There were photos of me. Dozens. Some were from my Instagram. Others I didn't even recognize, candid shots from a distance, or ones that had been edited to look more revealing. My face was clear in all of them. The caption said I was a sugar baby, that I dated older men for money, that I belonged to someone named Hyun. There were screenshots of fake messages, fabricated stories, a whole persona built out of my image. I stared at the screen for minutes before speaking. Then I called Taehyun. He answered right away. "You okay?" I said, "There's a blog with my photos. Someone's pretending I'm a sugar baby. They're using your name." He was silent. Then he said, "That's just fantasy." "What?" "It's not real," he said, like he was explaining the weather. "There's no harm in stories, right? People need outlets." "You wrote those stories?" He didn't answer. "You used my face." Still nothing. I hung up. I reported the blog. So did Hygiene. It was taken down eventually, but not before it was shared hundreds, maybe thousands of times. People I didn't know messaged me. Some asked for rates. Others sent threats. I deleted all my accounts the same night. I changed jobs 3 weeks later. Moved to a new apartment. Cut my hair. Bought a new phone. I filed a report, but the police said it was difficult to prove identity theft when the images were public to begin with. "Be careful what you share," they said. As if that's the lesson. I still see his face sometimes, on the street, in the reflection of shop windows. I don't know where he is now, but I know what he took. Not just my photos. Not just my privacy. He took the version of me that thought mystery was attractive, that thought silence meant safety. He showed me the mirror, and it cracked. I matched with Kareem on a Tuesday evening, sometime between my second coffee and a client deadline I had no intention of meeting. He didn't have the usual flexing in the gym or CEO at my own startup energy. Just a casual photo, clean-lined beard, knit sweater, a cat curled around his foot. His bio was simple, Byblos-born, Beirut-based. "I make things work online. Looking for something real." He messaged first. "Is your work always this beautiful?" I had a few design samples linked in my profile, not the kind of thing most men even noticed, let alone commented on. I replied with a cautious thanks. He followed up with a voice note. His voice was warm, steady. "You have an eye for softness," he said. "It shows in the way you use space. It's strange how intimacy can bloom in silence. In the pause between messages. In the way someone waits a beat before responding, as if they're actually thinking." Kareem had that rhythm. Measured. Almost hypnotic. We talked for a couple of weeks. He lived in Byblos, but said he often worked remotely in Beirut. He sent photos, sunsets from the Corniche, his cat sleeping under his desk, a stack of books on UX design and philosophy. I liked that he didn't rush. He didn't ask for selfies. He didn't suggest we meet right away. He let things simmer. When we did meet, it was at a rooftop cafe in Mar Mikhail. He wore a soft gray t-shirt and jeans, with prayer beads looped loosely around his wrist. He smelled like cedar and mint. When he hugged me hello, he didn't linger, but he didn't pull away too quickly either. "You look exactly like your photos," he said, "but warmer." He didn't touch his phone once during our date. I noticed that. It felt intentional. He asked about my work, my family, my favorite childhood cartoon. He told me he liked women who didn't need to be loud to be noticed. I laughed at that. "You mean modest?" I teased. "Modest is beautiful," he said. "Not because it hides anything, but because it holds something back for the right person." We didn't kiss that night. He walked me to my car and said, "I'd like to see you again. If you want that too." I did. The second date was dinner at his place. He cooked, nothing fancy, just grilled halloumi and ziyadar chicken. There was music playing, old Farahs on vinyl, the kind of songs that make you feel like you're watching your life from a balcony. He poured me a glass of wine, but didn't drink himself. "I keep halal," he said, "but I'm not here to police others." We sat on the floor, legs crossed, plates between us. I was buzzed from the wine, from the way his fingers brushed mine when he passed the bread. Later, he leaned in, not with urgency but with intention. His kiss was slow, careful, like he wanted to taste the idea of me more than the act itself. Things progressed naturally after that. He made the first move, but always asked before going further. When we finally slept together, it was unhurried. He whispered things in Arabic I didn't fully understand, but felt in my chest. Afterward, he held me so tightly I could feel his heartbeat in the small of my back. I thought I'd found someone who understood the language of restraint. But it didn't stay that way. The first shift was subtle. One morning, while we were lying in bed, scrolling through Instagram, he pointed at a photo I'd posted months ago. I was at the beach, nothing scandalous, just a tank top and sunglasses, laughing off camera. He said, "You really want people seeing you like that?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, soft but serious. "Not everyone deserves that access to you. Some men don't see a smile, they see an invitation." I rolled my eyes. "It's just a photo." He nodded. "But you're more than a photo." I didn't delete it right away. But later that night I did. I told myself it was harmless. Thoughtful even. Maybe he was just trying to protect me. Then it became a pattern. He started sending me screenshots of my own posts. Circling things. "This caption is too flirty. Why let strangers comment on your body? You don't need validation from men you'll never meet." He asked me to make my profile private. I did. Then he asked for my password. "Just so I can help you manage the settings. There's a lot of back-end stuff most people don't know about." I hesitated. He kissed my fingers. I'd never do anything without asking. Eventually I gave it to him. Not all at once, but in pieces. Like you do when you trust someone with your name, your stories, your body. You start to believe that keeping things to yourself is somehow a form of dishonesty. He started curating my feed, removing old posts, changing who could message me. He said I could still post, just more thoughtfully. He even offered to help me take new photos, ones that were elegant but safe. I didn't notice the shift in my own body at first. How I started sitting differently, dressing more conservatively, even when I was alone. How I hesitated before taking selfies. How I stopped sharing certain jokes in group chats because I wondered how they might sound if taken out of context. When I tried to set a boundary, when I said I didn't want him reading my DMs anymore, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said, "I understand. I do. I just think it's sad that you need to hide things from someone who sees you so clearly." Then he added, "What would your uncle think if he saw some of those messages?" That stopped me. My uncle was old school. Protective. He'd raised me like a second father after mine passed. The idea of disappointing him was enough to make my throat close. Kareem never mentioned him again. He didn't need to. I started deleting conversations before he could ask. I stopped replying to male colleagues after work hours. I turned off location sharing on Snapchat, but somehow he still knew when I was out late. When I pressed him, he said he was just intuitive. I believed him. Until I didn't. It was my cousin Tariq who finally opened my eyes. He came over one weekend to help me with a freelance project. He's in IT, one of those guys who can crack open a phone and rebuild it from memory. We were sitting on my couch when he asked to borrow my charger and noticed something odd on my home screen. "What's this app?" he asked, pointing at a small icon I'd never seen before. I shrugged. "I don't know. Probably something Kareem installed to help with storage or battery." Tariq's face changed. He didn't say anything, just plugged my phone into his laptop and started typing. 10 minutes later, he looked up. "Farah, this isn't a utility app. It's spyware." I blinked. "What?" "It tracks your location, records your calls, logs keystrokes. He's been monitoring everything." My mouth went dry. "You gave him your password?" I nodded quietly. Tariq sighed. He didn't need it. "This app gives him full access. He's probably been reading your messages for weeks, maybe months." I felt like I'd been stripped in public. We deleted the app, changed all my passwords, wiped the phone clean. Tariq installed a firewall and told me to cut contact immediately. I blocked Kareem that night. Everywhere. The next day he was gone from my life, but not from the internet. He started creating fake accounts, messaging my friends, commenting on old photos, posting in local WhatsApp groups under anonymous numbers, spreading rumors, saying I'd cheated, that I was sending inappropriate photos, that I'd lost my way. Some people believed him, but not my family. When I started uploading my songs to TikTok, it felt like I was singing into a room full of strangers who, somehow, understood me. I sang old Spanish ballads, the kind my mother played while cooking, the kind that made your heart ache even if you didn't know why. At first, it was just 5 or 6 likes, then a few hundred. Then a clip went viral, me singing Si Nos Dejan, eyes closed, voice shaking slightly at the end. The comments poured in. "Your voice healed something in me. I haven't cried like this in years. You sing like you've lived other people's pain." One of those comments came from Miguel. His message was longer than most. He said my music helped him survive a depressive episode. Said he hadn't left his apartment in weeks until he heard my voice. He called it a light, a thread, a reason. I replied, how could I not? We started talking, just friendly at first. He was soft-spoken, deeply thoughtful. A poet, he said. He'd send me fragments of lyrics, sometimes sketches of melodies. He never flirted, never made it weird. He said he respected my boundaries. We messaged almost every day. When he suggested meeting in person, I hesitated. But we'd built something, hadn't we? He lived nearby, said he just wanted to thank me in person. One coffee. No pressure. So I said yes. He was different in person. Not in a bad way, just quieter. Nervous. He barely made eye contact, and when I offered him a hug, he stiffened like he hadn't expected kindness to be physical. We talked for an hour, maybe more. He told me about his upbringing, his battles with isolation. I told him about stage fright, about how I still felt like a fraud when people applauded. He listened like every word was holy. He didn't try to kiss me. He didn't even touch my hand. I appreciated that. But something shifted after that. He messaged more. Longer paragraphs. Sent me playlists titled For Us, with songs that felt too intimate. He started saying things like, we're meant. I feel it in my soul. He called me his muse. Said I was the only person who ever truly saw him. I pulled back. I stopped replying as often. I was polite but distant. I didn't want to hurt him, but I didn't want to feed something that felt like it was growing too fast, too strangely. That's when the posts started. He uploaded videos of himself playing my songs on guitar. At first, it was flattering. Then he added captions like, she lied. I gave her everything. This is what betrayal sounds like. People began asking questions in my comments. What happened between you and Miguel? Why did you ghost him? Some believed him. Some didn't. But it didn't matter. The seed was planted. One night, I had a small gig. My first in months. He was there in the crowd staring. He didn't clap. Didn't smile. Just watched. Then he shouted my name. Security stepped in. He didn't cause a scene, but I was shaking the rest of the night. I filed a restraining order the next day. That's when the deepfakes started. Videos of me, fake ones, circulated in Spanish language forums. Edited with AI to make it look like I was saying things I never said, doing things I never did. He claimed they were proof of my betrayal, that I was manipulating fans, that I had seduced him and then discarded him. I shut everything down. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, gone. I stopped singing for a while. I couldn't even hum in the shower without hearing his voice in my head. I felt polluted by his obsession, like something sacred had been dragged through the mud. But silence isn't where I live. Eventually I came back. Not to him. Not to the old version of myself. I returned with a new voice, a sharper one. I hired a team to monitor my platforms. I stopped replying to DMs. I set hard boundaries. I sing what I want now, not what goes viral. And I don't mistake admiration for safety anymore. I met Aero in the waiting room of a tire shop. My car had blown a tire on the highway, and I was sitting there, scrolling through my phone, trying to pretend I wasn't internally cursing every decision that had led me to that moment. He was across from me, reading an actual newspaper, like printed, folded, and smudging ink on his fingers. When our eyes met, he smiled the kind of smile that made you feel like he wasn't in a rush for anything, like he'd been waiting there just long enough to meet you. He struck up a conversation. Said he liked old things that weren't trying to be retro, just honest. I said I liked people who didn't talk in slogans. He laughed, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything from poetry to how to properly poach an egg. He was 35. I was 27. The age gap felt flattering. I told myself he was just more grounded than the guys I usually dated. He asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was 3 days later. He picked a quiet bar with low lighting and dusty jazz records playing in the background. He wore a wool coat and carried a paperback novel in his pocket. He told me he was in architecture, freelance work now, and used to work for a firm that built hospitals. I like designing things that are meant to protect people, he said, like it was some sort of emotional thesis. He listened when I talked, asked questions that made me feel like my thoughts were rare and valuable. He wasn't loud. He didn't perform. He just watched me in a way that made me feel seen, like intensely, uncomfortably seen. At first, I liked it. Then I got used to it. Then I started to need it. He told me early on that he'd been through a lot, that his wife had died by suicide a few years earlier. She was beautiful, he said once, while absently stirring his coffee. But she had this darkness. It caught up with her. He said his best friend had died the year after that car accident. After that, I just stopped expecting people to stay. I remember thinking, that's why he's so careful. That's why he's so gentle. We started spending more time together. He never rushed things physically. In fact, he waited longer than anyone I'd dated. He said he wanted to be sure it meant something. He said he didn't want to rush intimacy because he'd learned how fragile connection could be. It was romantic in a somber kind of way, but I started noticing things. He never let me drive his car. Not even once. He always picked me up. Always dropped me off. If I asked why, he'd say something teasing. You'll fall in love with her and run away. Like the car was some precious entity. I thought it was quirky. Then, one night, I left my scarf in his glove box. It had fallen between the passenger seat and the console. The next morning, I went to grab it while he was inside a coffee shop. That's when I found the letter. It was crumpled, stuck under a few receipts, and addressed to someone named Claire. Not mailed. Not even in an envelope. Just folded over. The handwriting was neat. Careful. I didn't read much, just the first few lines. I know I shouldn't write this. I told myself I'd stop. But I missed the way we used to look at each other when no one was watching. I froze. When he came back to the car, I didn't say anything. I just handed him the scarf, smiled, and stared out the window. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next day, I asked him about Claire. Casually. As if the name had just come up in a dream. He blinked once. Then said, my cousin. She passed away a few years ago. He said it so effortlessly. I almost believed him. But something had shifted. I started noticing more inconsistencies. Stories that didn't quite line up. He said he'd lived in Berlin for a year in his 20s, then later told me he'd never left North America. He said his best friend had died in a motorcycle crash, but earlier he'd said it was a drunk driver. When I asked him about the timeline of his wife's passing, the dates kept shifting by a few months. I told myself grief could do that. That trauma messes with memory. But it wasn't just the stories. It was the silences. Sometimes he'd stare off mid-conversation, like he was watching something only he could see. Other times, he'd ask me strange questions. Do you think you could ever forgive someone who lied to you for the right reasons? If someone had done something terrible but they were trying to be better, would you stay? I'd laugh it off. But deep down, I started to feel like I was part of an equation I didn't understand. Then I saw the photos. They weren't on his phone. They were on someone else's. I was scrolling on social media one night, half asleep, when I saw a post by a woman I didn't know. The algorithm had pushed it into my feed, probably because she'd tagged a location I'd been to recently. The post was cheerful. A sunny afternoon at a park. Smiling faces. A man holding a child. The man was Arrow. Her caption said, "Family time with my favorite people." I clicked through her profile. They looked happy. Domestic. There were pictures of the little girl painting, of Arrow teaching her to ride a bike, of the woman kissing him on the cheek while he grilled something in their backyard. I felt like I'd been punched in the teeth. The girl, her daughter, was maybe 7. In the background of one photo, I saw the same car Arrow always picked me up in. The same coat hanging on a hook in their hallway. I didn't message the woman right away. I stared at her page for hours. I kept refreshing, hoping it would vanish. That I'd misread something. But it was all there. I eventually reached out. I told her we needed to talk. That I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just needed the truth. She was cautious, understandably. But after a few messages, we spoke. She said she'd been dating him for 2 years. That he wasn't the girl's father, but had been like a dad to her. That he said he worked nights sometimes, and had to travel for freelance projects. She told me her daughter had started saying strange things. That Arrow made her uncomfortable. That he stared too long. That he didn't knock before entering her room. She'd brushed it off at first. Said she thought it was just a kid being sensitive. But now, hearing my story, she wasn't so sure. We went to the police. They listened. Wrote things down. Asked questions. But they said it wasn't enough. No solid evidence. Nothing they could act on unless the child made a formal statement. I reported what I could. She did too. We sent screenshots, timelines, names. I still check her social media. Every few weeks. Just to be sure they're still posting. That the daughter is smiling. That he hasn't vanished again. At 19, I felt older than I had any right to be. Everything changed the day my father collapsed in our kitchen. One moment he was fixing the faucet, humming an old Eraserhead song, and the next he was on the floor, his body still, the spatula clattering beside him. A heart attack, the doctors said. There was nothing we could have done. It was sudden, final, and cruel. After that, I became the backbone of our family whether I wanted to or not. My mom had been battling lupus for years, and without my dad, her condition worsened. She could barely get out of bed most days. My little brother, Enzo, was only 11, too young to understand why everything suddenly felt so heavy, why I was always tired, why Nene cried in the middle of the night when she thought we were asleep. I dropped out of my second year at university, psychology ironically, and found a job as a cashier at a grocery store chain in Quezon City. It paid minimum wage, but it was something. I worked long shifts and gave most of my salary to cover medicine, groceries, and Enzo's school supplies. I didn't have time to think about anything else. My life became a routine of waking up before the sun, rushing through crowded jeepney rides, scanning barcodes for hours, and coming home to boil rice and heat whatever canned food we had left. One night, after an especially long day, my manager had accused me of stealing 20 pesos from the till, which I hadn't. I sat on the edge of our rickety couch, exhausted. My phone buzzed, mostly spam and group messages I hadn't answered in weeks. In a moment of frustration and loneliness I hadn't let myself feel in months, I opened the App Store and downloaded a dating app I'd seen in passing on Instagram. Halleck. I felt silly. What did I think I'd find there? Love? A distraction? I didn't know. I made a profile with an old photo, one where I still looked like a university student, slightly hopeful, wearing a maroon hoodie and no makeup. Within minutes of scrolling through blurry selfies and shirtless poses, I matched with someone named Brian. He messaged first. "You look tired in your photo. Long day." I laughed. It was blunt but honest. It was better than the usual "hi beautiful." I replied, "Always. Working full-time and taking care of my family." "Same," he said. "I take care of my aunt. She's diabetic. It's not easy, but you do what you have to do." That night, we talked until my phone died. He was kind, funny in a quiet way, and never made me feel like I had to pretend. Over the next days, chatting with him became something I looked forward to. He messaged me in the mornings, sent me silly memes during my breaks, and told me stories about his deliveries around Metro Manila. He said he worked freelance, doing pickups and drop-offs, and lived with his aunt in an old house in Pasig. When we finally met in person, he took me to a quiet cafe in Cubao. He brought a bouquet of white daisies and asked about my mom and Enzo like he meant it. He didn't try to touch me, didn't act like he expected anything. He just listened. It felt like breathing fresh air after months underground. Soon, he started bringing me lunch at work, homemade adobo, fast food, even tejo once. He offered to drive me home when he could, and once picked up Enzo from school when I had a late shift. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic. He was consistent, steady, in a life that felt like it could collapse at any moment. That meant everything. One evening, after I mentioned how much I was spending on jeepney rides and how little sleep I was getting, he said, "Why don't you just move in with me and Tita Gloria? There's an extra room. You'd save money, have more time to spend with your family. No pressure, just think about it." At first, I said no. It felt too soon, too big. But he didn't push. He just said, "You deserve to rest." And the truth was, I was drowning. We were barely scraping by. I spent more on transport every week than I made in a day. My mom's medicine was getting more expensive. I needed help. So, after a few more weeks of him insisting it was just temporary, that I'd have my own space, that I could still visit home as often as I wanted, I said yes. The house in Pasig was tucked behind a row of sari-sari stores. It was old, with peeling paint and a sagging roof, but it was clean. A mango tree shaded the porch, and the inside smelled like garlic and wood polish. Gloria, his aunt, welcomed me with an apron on and curlers in her hair. She called me Anik within 5 minutes. At first, it was peaceful. Gloria cooked big meals and always made sure I ate enough. Brian was affectionate. He'd kiss my forehead before leaving and check on me throughout the day. I started sleeping more, eating better. I even started sketching again, something I hadn't done in over a year. I thought maybe this was the break I needed. Maybe I could finally breathe. But then things started to shift. It started small. Gloria handed me a chore list one morning. Just a few things: sweep the floor, wash dishes, feed the dog, water the plants. I didn't mind. I was staying there for free, after all. Then Brian began commenting on things. "You missed a spot on the window. You left your shoes by the door again. You slept the whole afternoon?" Gloria chimed in too. "You're lucky we took you in," she'd say. Don't get too comfortable. Brian stopped bringing me lunch. Then he said I should quit my job. Why are you working? He asked. You're just wasting money on fare. We have everything we need here. I resisted at first, but he made it sound like he was doing me a favor. You can rest. Focus on your mom. I'll take care of you. I quit. He started controlling other things, who I talked to, what I wore. He deleted my social media accounts, said they were a waste of time. He said my old friends didn't care about me. When I asked to visit my mom, he said she needed rest. You'll only stress her out, Gloria added. One day my phone disappeared. Brian said it was broken. He handed me an old Nokia and said, "This is safer. No distractions." I felt like the walls were closing in. I had no way to contact anyone, no money of my own, no job, no privacy. The verbal abuse came next. You're ungrateful, he said once when I asked about my allowance. We're feeding you, aren't we? He'd criticize how I folded the laundry, how I cooked rice, how I breathed too loudly. Then he started throwing things. A plate once, a slipper the next week. Always followed by silence. Gloria never said anything. Sometimes she smirked. One night, after I asked him if I could go visit Enzo's school for a parent-teacher meeting, he shoved me against the bathroom door. It wasn't a punch, but it hurt. My shoulder ached for days, and something inside me cracked open. I waited until the next morning. He was out, making deliveries. Gloria was watching her telenovela, half asleep. I found my old phone under the sink where I had hidden it weeks earlier. The screen was cracked, but it turned on. I sent a message to my mom. Tell Enzo I love him. Call me in 5 minutes and pretend it's an emergency. She didn't ask questions. She just replied, okay. When the phone rang, I answered loudly. What? She's in the hospital? I'm coming now. I packed the small bag I kept hidden behind the closet. I told Gloria I needed to go and didn't wait for her to respond. I took the first bus I could find and didn't stop shaking until I saw our house again. My mother, frail but upright, opened the door. Enzo ran to me and didn't let go. I sobbed harder than I ever had.